Hello there, and welcome to HypnoHelix, where curiosity gets cozy and science takes the scenic route to slumber. Tonight's gentle journey is all about one of the most mysterious forces we live by, but barely understand: time. It slips through our fingers, shapes our days, and occasionally plays tricks on us, especially when we're waiting for a kettle to boil. But before we unravel the ticking tapestry of time, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Fitting, isn't it? A video about time. And here we are, scattered across time zones, each of us arriving at this very moment in our own unique slice of the clock. If you find this voyage soothing, intriguing, or just a nice way to unwind after a long day, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave the video a like, and maybe subscribed. It helps this little corner of calm reach others who might need a peaceful pause too. Now, I do hope this isn't so fascinating that it keeps you awake. But if it does, well, at least you'll have learned something about the fabric of the universe before you drift off. So settle in, slow your thoughts, and let's begin. Because somewhere between seconds and centuries, dreams and daylight, lies the story of time. Time has a funny way of stretching and shrinking, doesn't it? 10 minutes spent stuck in traffic can feel like an eternity, while 10 minutes on your favorite hobby disappears faster than the last biscuit in the tin. And yet, clocks tick forward at the same rate, second after second, minute after minute. So what's going on? The answer begins not with physics, but with your brain. Our perception of time, that internal sense of when things start and end, is surprisingly flexible. Psychologists call it subjective time, and it's heavily influenced by things like attention, emotion, and memory. In other words, how you feel about time can be very different from how time is actually passing. Let's start with the oddity of waiting. Imagine you're in a doctor's waiting room. The walls are beige, the magazines are ancient, and the clock ticks loudly in the corner, like it's trying to win a competition for the world's most annoying sound. 5 minutes there can feel like half an hour. That's because your brain is starved for stimulation. When not much is happening, your attention turns inward, and that internal focus makes you more aware of each passing second. Compare that to a lively conversation with a friend, or getting lost in a good book. In those moments, you're fully engaged, and your brain isn't keeping track of time so closely. It's like your mind goes, we're busy, no need to watch the clock. And before you know it, hours have flown by. This is sometimes called a flow state, a term coined by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, where your sense of time fades into the background as you become fully absorbed in the present. Interestingly, the novelty of an experience also plays a role. When you encounter something new or unfamiliar, your brain takes extra time to process and store the memory. Later, when you look back, it feels like more time must have passed, because there's more mental footage of the event. That's why childhood summers seem to stretch on forever. Your brain was constantly encountering new experiences, and it logged every bit of it. As we get older and routine set in, our brains get more efficient at compressing memories. Fewer highlights, shorter reels. Time seems to speed up. Emotion plays a part too. Studies show that fear and anxiety can slow our perception of time, while joy and excitement speed it up. There's even a theory that in dangerous or intense situations, your brain creates denser memories, giving the illusion that time has slowed down. This is sometimes reported by people who've been in car accidents or other emergencies. It's not that time actually slows, it's that your brain records more details per second, creating a kind of slow motion playback effect. Then there's the curious case of boredom. You probably heard the phrase, time flies when you're having fun, but the opposite, time crawls when you're bored, is equally true. Neuroscientists have found that when we're bored, the brain's internal pacemaker, yes, that's a real term, becomes more active. This creates more pulses in our perception, making time seem to drag. It's like having an overenthusiastic drummer in your head, tapping out every beat of a dull moment. Cultural background and language also influence how we perceive time. In English, we often talk about time as if it's a resource. We spend time, save time, or run out of it. But some languages, like Hopi, don't treat time as a line you move along, but more like a landscape or a set of conditions. This shapes how people in different cultures think about the future and the past. In fact, in some parts of the world, people point behind them to indicate the future because it's unknown, and in front of them to show the past because it's already visible. Quite the opposite of how we usually picture things. But what about our inner clocks? Surely there must be some kind of biological mechanism ticking away, giving us at least a rough idea of the passage of time. Humans have something called a circadian rhythm, a 24-hour cycle that helps regulate sleep, body temperature, and hormone levels. But that's more like a daily timer than a stopwatch. For shorter periods, seconds, minutes, scientists believe we use a kind of mental timekeeper, often compared to a stopwatch in the brain. This system involves a network of brain regions, including the basal ganglia and the cerebellum, and it seems to rely on a steady stream of neural pulses. When we estimate how long something takes, we're subconsciously counting those pulses. That said, we're not always good at it. Our time estimations can be wildly off, especially when we're multitasking, distracted, or emotionally charged. There's even a psychological phenomenon called the return trip effect, where the journey back from somewhere feels shorter than the trip there, even if it takes the exact same amount of time. Why? On the way there, your brain is actively processing new information. On the way back, it already knows the route, so the experience feels faster. And let's not forget the most universal distortion of time known to humankind, the snooze button. Somehow, those 9 minutes between alarms feel shorter than any other 9 minutes in the universe. While there's no hard science behind that specific feeling, yet, it's probably another case of disrupted sleep, incomplete consciousness, and our fuzzy internal stopwatch just throwing up its hands and giving up. So what is time, at least as we experience it? It's not just a number on a clock or the shadow of a sundial. It's a feeling, a perception, a trick of memory and attention. It changes with our mood, our age, and even the language we speak. It speeds up when we're in love, slows down when we're scared, and sometimes, just sometimes, seems to vanish altogether. And while physics may eventually explain what time is on the grandest scales, our personal sense of time will always be something deeply human, wobbly, wonderful, and, at times, delightfully unreliable. If time is mysterious, then our efforts to measure it are a testament to both human ingenuity and impatience. From ancient sundials to atomic clocks, we spend millennia trying to wrangle this invisible force into something we can see, count, and ideally schedule around. Because while time may wait for no one, humans are very fond of asking it to hold on just a minute. Church towers and monasteries, they didn't have faces or hands. They just rang bells at regular intervals to mark the passing hours, mostly to remind monks when to pray. You might say monks were the world's first alarm clock users, albeit far more serene about it than most of us at 6 a.m. One of the first major leaps forward came in the 14th century with the invention of the verge escapement, a clever bit of engineering that allowed for more controlled and regular release of energy. This made it possible to build smaller, more reliable mechanical clocks. Eventually, clockmakers added dials and hands, so people could actually see the time, not just hear it told. From there, the pace of innovation began to tick faster. By the 17th century, the pendulum clock entered the scene, thanks to the brilliant Dutch scientist Christian Huygens. Pendulum clocks were accurate to within a minute a day, a staggering improvement over earlier designs that could drift by hours. If time was a horse, the pendulum was a saddle that let us ride it with more confidence. The need for even more precise timekeeping became critical during the age of exploration. Sailors desperately needed to know their longitude, and that required knowing the exact time at a fixed reference point, like Greenwich. Enter John Harrison, an English carpenter who spent decades inventing marine chronometers, ultra-precise clocks that could survive the rocking and rolling of a ship at sea. His fourth model, the H4, changed navigation forever and earned him a belated but well-deserved place in history. Also, possibly a few eye rolls from people who've been using stars and gut instinct until then. By the 20th century, we entered the age of quartz. Quartz crystal oscillators, first developed in the 1920s, revolutionized timekeeping. When subjected to an electric current, quartz vibrates at an incredibly stable frequency. These vibrations were used to keep time with far greater precision than anything mechanical. Suddenly, clocks and watches could be cheap, portable, and accurate enough to keep the trains running on time. Or at least give us no excuse when they didn't. But even quartz has its limits. If you want to know the most accurate time on Earth, you'll have to go atomic. Atomic clocks, first developed in the 1950s, measure time using the natural vibrations of atoms, usually cesium or rubidium. A cesium atom, for instance, oscillates exactly 9,192,631,770 times per second. That number isn't just trivia. It's the official definition of a second according to the International System of Units. These clocks are so precise that if you ran one for 100 million years, it would be off by less than a second, which is great, assuming you have 100 million years to wait for your tea to steep. Today, atomic clocks are used to synchronize everything from GPS satellites to internet servers, telecommunications, and global financial systems. Without them, your phone's map wouldn't work, your bank transactions would be chaos, and half the world would miss their Zoom calls. Time, once measured by dripping water and sun shadows, now depends on atoms flipping like microscopic metronomes in high-tech vaults. And yet, despite all this precision, time still feels strangely personal. We can divide it into hours, minutes, and seconds. We can watch it scroll by on digital screens. But no matter how finely we slice it, we each live it differently. So why did we begin measuring it in the first place? Some say it was to regulate prayer. Others, to grow crops, mark seasons, or schedule trade. But maybe, just maybe, it's because humans, for all our love of stories and stars, are deeply comforted by rhythm. The steady beat of time, no matter how elusive, gives shape to our days. It offers order in chaos. A tick, a tock, a tiny whisper from the universe saying, "You're here now." And that, after all, is what time has always been. Not just measurement, but a companion. For most of human history, time was a local affair. It rose with the sun, ended with the stars, and ambled through the hours at the mercy of bells, birdsong, or an enthusiastic rooster. But then came Isaac Newton, a man who didn't just want to describe the world, but to pin it down. And that included time. Newton, the 17th century English physicist with a famously dramatic hair and a knack for app-related anecdotes, gave the world a model of the universe that would dominate science for over 2 centuries. In his view, space and time were like a grand, invisible stage on which the drama of the universe unfolded. The actors, planets, apples, cannonballs, and eventually bicycles, moved about, but the stage itself, it never changed. Time, in this picture, was absolute. It ticked along at a constant rate. Everywhere, for everyone, forever. This concept, absolute time, was central to Newton's physics. In his own words, absolute, true, and mathematical time of itself and from its own nature flows equitably without regard to anything external. In other words, time is like a river, a flow that moves at a steady pace, regardless of whether anyone is watching, counting, or floating along in a canoe. It made intuitive sense. Drop an object today or tomorrow, here or in another city, and Newton's equations could tell you exactly where it would be at any point in time, assuming you had enough coffee and a solid grasp of calculus. Time was a steady backdrop against which motion, force, and gravity did their thing. Newton's absolute time gave scientists a powerful tool. It allowed them to describe motion in precise terms, to synchronize events, to create reliable predictions. If you wanted to calculate the orbit of a planet, the swing of a pendulum, or the fall of a cannonball, you can now plug it all into one neat mathematical framework. Time, in this model, was universal, the same everywhere for everything, ticking along in perfect, impartial harmony. But for all its usefulness, this idea came with a rather large assumption. That time was a thing in itself, existing independently of the stuff happening within it. A kind of invisible metronome, keeping the beat of the cosmos. There were, however, a few dissenting voices. The philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, Newton's intellectual rival and co-inventor of calculus, didn't buy into the idea of absolute time, or Newton's version of calculus. For that matter, that time was not some universal backdrop, but a measure of change, a way of describing the order of events. Without events, he claimed, there is no time. It's not a thing on its own, but a relationship between things. Imagine a clock in a completely empty universe, ticking away in total silence and darkness. For Newton, that clock is still measuring time. For Leibniz, it's just a fancy paperweight, with no one to notice. To him, time only has meaning when things happen. Newton wasn't having it. He insisted that time was real and flowed regardless of what was going on, which, to be fair, does match the feeling of waiting for a pot to boil. Newton's ideas eventually became the foundation of what's now called classical mechanics. And for a very long time, classical mechanics worked beautifully. It could describe a motion of falling objects, swinging pendulums, the orbits of the moon and planets, and even, with enough effort, the motion of a juggling unicyclist. So it's worth pausing to admire just how successful Newton's framework was. For hundreds of years, scientists relied on his absolute time and space to explore the natural world. Clocks became more precise. Navigation improved. Engineering leapt forward. Steam trains ran on time, or at least had a better excuse when they didn't. But here's the twist. As good as Newton's model was, it eventually started to crack under pressure. In the 19th century, scientists studying light and electromagnetism noticed strange things. Experiments suggested that the speed of light was always the same, no matter how fast you were moving. That didn't make sense in Newton's universe. If a car speeds up, it should catch up to light a little more quickly, right? But it didn't. The light always sped away at the same pace. This problem simmered for a while, until a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein. But we'll leave his entrance for another chapter. Suffice it to say, he would take Newton's absolute time, give it a polite nod, and then turn it completely upside down. Still, Newton's idea of time as an ever-flowing universal quantity left a deep imprint on science and culture. We still speak of time as something we can waste, spend, or save, all phrases that make sense of time as a commodity trickling away. Our workdays, school bells, and microwave settings all run on the belief that time ticks the same for everyone. And in many everyday situations, that's still perfectly true. When you're baking a cake, catching a bus, or trying to remember when your online order is due, Newton's time works just fine. It's only when we start dealing with high speeds, strong gravity, or extremely small scales that Newton's picture begins to blur. So, in the grand story of time, Newton gave us a solid middle chapter, a vision of a predictable mechanical universe running like, well, clockwork. He brought order to the cosmos and made time something we could measure, trust, and, if only briefly, understand. But time, as we'll see, has more than one personality. And while Newton's time is wonderfully logical, the universe may not be quite so straightforward. If Isaac Newton imagined time as an endless river, flowing at a steady pace for everyone, Albert Einstein came along and said, actually, it's more like a wibbly-wobbly trampoline. That's not a direct quote, but it's surprisingly close to the truth. In the early 20th century, Einstein upended our understanding of time. With a set of ideas so radical, they reshaped the very fabric of reality. He called it relativity, and it came in two parts: special relativity and later, general relativity. Both of them had plenty to say about time, none of it particularly intuitive. Let's begin with special relativity, published in 1905, when Einstein was just 26 and working at the Swiss Patent Office, probably spending his lunch breaks rewriting the universe. One of the key ideas of special relativity is that the laws of physics, including the speed of light, are the same for all observers, no matter how fast they're moving. Now, this causes a problem for Newton's absolute time. In Newton's world, if two people are moving at different speeds, they still agree on when things happen. But in Einstein's world, that's not necessarily true. Events that appear simultaneous to one person might not look simultaneous to someone moving at a different speed. This leads to one of the strangest consequences of special relativity: time dilation. Simply put, the faster you move, the slower time passes for you, relative to someone standing still. If you were to board a spaceship and zoom off at near light speed, your onboard clock would tick more slowly than the one back on Earth. You'd age more slowly. Your hair would take longer to grow. You'd miss entire seasons of your favorite shows. This isn't just science fiction. It's been observed. One famous experiment involved flying atomic clocks around the world on airplanes. When compared to identical clocks that stayed on the ground, the airborne ones had ticked ever so slightly more slowly. Not enough to notice, unless you're very punctual, but enough to prove that time really does slow down with speed. And then there's the famous twin paradox. Imagine two identical twins. One boards a spaceship and flies around the galaxy at high speed. The other stays home, feeds a cat, and waits. When the traveling twin returns, they'll be younger than their sibling, not because they used a great skincare routine in space, but because their time actually passed more slowly. The paradox isn't a contradiction. It's a feature of relativity, a confusing, mind-bending feature, but a real one. But speed isn't the only thing that messes with time. In 1915, Einstein expanded his theory into something even bigger: general relativity. This theory dealt with gravity and revealed that gravity too can warp time. General relativity describes gravity not as a force, but as the curvature of space-time caused by mass. The more massive an object, the more it bends space around it, like placing a bowling ball on a soft mattress. If time were painted onto that mattress, it would stretch and warp along with the space. What this means is that time runs more slowly in stronger gravitational fields. If you stand next to something really massive, like a black hole or your friend's overpacked suitcase, time ticks more slowly for you than for someone farther away from the mass. Again, it isn't just theory. It's been measured here on Earth. In one experiment, two ultra-precise atomic clocks were placed at different altitudes, one at the base of a mountain, the other at the top. The clock lower down, closer to Earth's center of gravity, ticked a tiny bit more slowly. Even a height difference of just a few centimeters can cause a measurable change in time. So yes, technically, your head is aging faster than your feet. This phenomenon, called gravitational time dilation, has real-world consequences. GPS satellites orbiting Earth experience both types of time warping. They're moving fast, which slows their time, but they're also farther from Earth's gravity, which speeds it up. To keep your phone's map accurate, their onboard clocks are constantly adjusted to account for these distortions. Without those corrections, your location would be off by several kilometers within minutes. Time doesn't just pass. It wobbles, and technology has to wobble with it. So what does all this mean for our understanding of time? Einstein showed us that time is an absolute, universal river. It's more like a stretchy fabric, woven together with space itself. It can expand, contract, bend, and twist, depending on speed and gravity. And that means your time, the pace at which you experience the universe, depends on where you are and how you move. It's a deeply strange idea, but also kind of beautiful. Time is no longer the same for everyone, everywhere. It's personal, relational, a bit like your taste in tea. Einstein's work didn't just rewrite physics textbooks. It changed how we see reality itself. Time is not a fixed background. It's part of the dance, shifting with the rhythm of matter and motion. And even though most of us don't feel time stretching or shrinking in our daily lives, every second we live is shaped by these subtle distortions. So next time someone says they're running out of time, you can gently remind them, actually, time is running out differently depending on your velocity and proximity to gravitational mass. Then pause, smile, and maybe duck. Let's imagine, just for a moment, that you wake up one morning and find everything running backwards. Toast leaps out of your mouth and lands, perfectly buttered, on a plate. Your tea grows hotter as you drink it. Raindrops fly upward into the sky. Strange? Certainly. Impossible, according to the laws of physics? Not exactly. This odd little thought experiment leads us to one of the most intriguing questions in science. Why does time seem to have a direction in most of the fundamental laws of physics? From Newton's laws of motion to the equations of quantum mechanics, time doesn't really have a preferred direction. They work just as well backwards as they do forwards. If you filmed two particles colliding and played it in reverse, the physics would still check out. No alarms would go off in equations. And yet, in everyday life, time feels like a one-way street. Eggs break, but don't unbreak. Paper burns, but ashes don't reassemble into books. We remember the past, but not the future. So, why the disconnect? Why does time at our human scale march so relentlessly from yesterday to tomorrow? Enter the concept of the arrow of time. The arrow of time is a metaphor used to describe the one-way direction in which time appears to flow, from the past to the future. And the key to understanding this arrow lies in one of the most important and occasionally untidy laws of physics. The second law of thermodynamics. This law tells us that in a closed system, like the universe, entropy always increases over time. Entropy is a measure of disorder or randomness. In other words, things tend to go from tidy to messy. You can scramble an egg, but you can't unscramble it. Your desk will naturally become cluttered unless you actively organize it. Socks will always disappear mysteriously, but never reappear in pairs. This tendency toward increasing entropy gives time its arrow. It's why we experience events in a particular sequence. The low entropy past becomes the high entropy future, and there's no reversing the flow, unless you're a time traveler or a fictional wizard with a very specific spell. Think of it this way. Imagine a glass shattering on the floor. That's a high entropy state. The shards are spread out and energy has been lost in the chaos. It's extremely unlikely that all those fragments will spontaneously leap back together into a perfect glass. Not impossible, just astronomically improbable, and that's the key. The laws of physics allow for time reversal, in theory, but probability stands firmly in the way. This leads to one of the most intriguing and slightly unsettling questions in cosmology. Why was the universe in such a low entropy state to begin with? After all, if entropy must increase, there had to be a starting point, a kind of cosmic neat and tidy drawer from which all this disorder could unfold. The leading theory? That the early universe, just after the Big Bang, was incredibly uniform, smooth-ordered, low entropy. Over billions of years, gravity and expansion did their thing. The universe got clumpier, more chaotic. Galaxies formed, stars exploded, and socks disappeared at an accelerating rate. But why it started that way is still one of physics' biggest open mysteries. Some scientists suspect the answer lies in the deep relationship between entropy, time, and the geometry of space itself. Others wonder if the question is even meaningful, or if we're just asking it from the wrong angle, like a goldfish trying to understand water. There are other arrows of time too, each pointing the same way. There's a psychological arrow. We remember the past, not the future. That's because memories require physical processes in the brain that leave behind traces. And those traces are part of entropy increasing. You can't remember the future because it hasn't happened yet. At the heart of your biological clockwork is a tiny region in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short. It's nestled in your hypothalamus, just above where the optic nerves cross. That's no coincidence. It's the perfect place to sync your internal rhythm with light from the outside world. Every morning, as sunlight hits your eyes, your SCN receives a signal. Time to wake up. It starts sending out commands to adjust your body temperature, hormone levels, and alertness. One of its most powerful tools is melatonin, often called the sleep hormone. As the day winds down and the light fades, melatonin levels rise, nudging you towards sleep. Come morning, light suppresses melatonin, gently pulling you out of dreamland. It's your body's way of whispering, maybe just one less episode tonight. But here's a curious thing. Your circadian rhythm doesn't naturally run on a perfect 24-hour schedule. Left entirely to its own devices, say, in a dark cave with no clocks, your internal cycle would drift. For most humans, It runs a little long, about 24.2 hours. It's morning sunlight that resets your internal timepiece every day, anchoring you to Earth's rhythm. Disrupt that natural rhythm, and your body gets confused. Enter jet lag, our least favorite travel companion. Fly across time zones, and suddenly your brain thinks it's midnight when it's lunchtime. Your stomach, liver, and immune system are all out of sync, stuck in yesterday's time zone. While your brain might adjust in a day or two, digestive system could take a week to catch up, wondering why dinner smells like airplane pretzels. But jet lag isn't the only modern disruptor. One of the biggest culprits is something nearly all of us have invited into our homes: artificial light. Before electricity, humans woke with the sunrise and dozed off with sunset. But now, we live bathed in screens and bulbs, especially those that emit blue light, which tells your brain it's still daytime. This suppresses melatonin and delays your internal clock, making it harder to fall asleep and even harder to wake up. It's not just that we become night owls. It's more like we've handed a neon owl the remote control and let it run the show. Interestingly, not everyone's circadian rhythm is the same. Some people are natural early risers, larks, while others hit their stride at midnight, owls. These differences, known as chronotypes, are partly genetic. So if you struggle with 8 a.m. meetings, it's not just you being lazy. Your brain genuinely doesn't believe it's time to be awake yet. Circadian rhythms also affect your body temperature, which dips before dawn and rises throughout the day, peaking in the late afternoon. That's one reason athletes and performers often excel in the evening. Their bodies are warmer, sharper, more efficient. On the flip side, that early morning presentation you dread, you're literally doing it half frozen. But biological time isn't just about sleep and performance. It goes much deeper. It affects your metabolism, your immune system, your mood, and even how your body responds to medicine. There's an entire field called chronopharmacology, which studies how the timing of medication influences its effectiveness. The same drug might work better at night or in the morning, depending on your internal timing and what it's targeting. Even plants keep time. They open their leaves to sunlight, close them at night, and begin stirring even before dawn, anticipating the light. This isn't just a passive response. It's an internal rhythm that continues even in total darkness. The sunflower doesn't track the sun because it sees it. It turns because it remembers. In the animal kingdom, too, from birds to bees to tiny nocturnal rodents, circadian rhythms regulate everything from hunting to mating to hibernation. In the end, you are not separate from clock. You are the clock. Every blink, breath, and heartbeat is part of a beautiful, biological symphony that's been ticking quietly since long before the first clock tower rang out over a sleepy village. And tomorrow, just like today, your body will rise with the rhythm of light, dancing to a song it's always known but never heard. Even fungi, the mysterious dwellers of forest floors, have internal clocks that guide when to grow, when to release spores, and when to rest. All of this paints a remarkable picture. Life on Earth is deeply entwined with time, not just mechanical kind tracked by atomic clocks, but a biological time grounded in light and dark, warmth and cold, hunger and rest. It's a time that pulses through living things like a gentle, ancient drumbeat. So for the next time you find yourself nodding off at 3 p.m. or unusually energized at midnight, know that it's not just random, it's rhythm. Your body is dancing to a beat set long before alarm clocks, calendars, or double-shot espressos existed. And no matter how much we try to bend time to our will with schedules and screens, deep inside, our cells still follow the sun, quietly, faithfully, like they always have. But have you ever noticed how time seems to play favorites? A holiday vanishes in a blink, yet the final 10 minutes of an unwanted Zoom call feel like they stretch on forever. This isn't just poetic exaggeration. It's the mind-bending magic of psychological time, the strange, subjective way we perceive the passing of moments, often wildly disconnected from any actual clock. Where physics tries to explain time as it is, psychology explores how it feels. And those are two very different realities. Take the cliche, time flies when you're having fun. Turns out it's backed by science. When we're deeply immersed, laughing with friends, lost in the creative flow, or watching something captivating, our attention isn't on the clock. We're not counting seconds. Our brain slips into the moment, and time, quite literally, seems to vanish. On the flip side, boredom stretches time like molasses. Waiting rooms, buffering videos, or dry lectures can make every second feel like its own eternity. That's because when our brains aren't stimulated, we begin to monitor time more closely. Every tick becomes painfully apparent. There's also a fascinating distinction between experienced time and remembered time. While we're in the moment, time may feel fast or slow depending on how engaged we are. But when we reflect back, the memory often tells a different story. For example, a week spent hiking in unfamiliar places might feel like it flew by while it was happening. But looking back, it feels rich and long. That's because novelty lays down more mental bookmarks. More detail in memory creates the illusion that more time has passed. Contrast that with a week of routine. Wake, work, scroll, sleep. In the moment it might drag, but in hindsight, it blurs together, forgotten almost as soon as it ends. Fewer bookmarks, less perceived time. This may also help explain why time seems to speed up as we grow older. Childhood is packed with firsts. First day of school, first heartbreak, first time riding a bike. Each moment is vivid, unique, and mentally recorded. But as adults, life settles into rhythm. Fewer surprises, fewer sharp memories, days blend, and before we know it, decades have vanished. Emotional intensity can also warp time. When we're afraid, anxious, or in danger, time seems to slow. People who've been in accidents or free-fall scenarios often report that everything moved in slow motion. It's not that time actually slowed down. Experiments show performance doesn't improve during these moments, but our brain captures more detail under stress, and that dense memory later feels like it lasted longer. Then there's attention, the most powerful tool in shaping our perception of time. When we're waiting, watching cookies bake, or counting down to an event, we're acutely aware of every second. But when our minds are engaged, lost in music, laughter, or even deep thought, time fades to the background. This is why mindfulness and meditation can feel so timeless. When we focus entirely on the present moment, on a breath, a sound, a single sensation, our usual time-tracking brain quiets. We're not hypnotized or unaware. We've simply stepped into a place where time no longer dominates us, but fades into stillness. On the far edge of human experience are altered states of consciousness, brought on by deep meditation, extreme emotion, or certain substances. People often describe time slowing down, speeding up, looping, or disappearing entirely. Some speak of timelessness, not a distortion of time, but the total absence of it, like stepping outside the river and watching from shore. Neurologically, these experiences may stem from shifts in the brain's default mode network, the areas responsible for self-awareness, memory, and time perception. When that network quiets, our sense of self and time can dissolve. Children, too, live in a vastly different timescape. For them, time is fluid, imprecise, and often irrelevant. Ask a 5-year-old how long 5 minutes is, and you'll likely get an answer like forever or until I finish the snack. Only through development, structure, and repeated exposure do children begin to grasp time as a linear, measurable thing. In truth, we never outgrow the dance with time. We only grow more skilled at pretending we control it. Because whether or not time is fundamental, etched into the cosmos, or something that emerges from chaos and complexity, one thing is certain. We live by it, we love through it, we heal in it. We are made of time. And every moment is an invitation to remember that. It's only when children are introduced to clocks, schedules, and the dreaded phrase, just a few more minutes, that they begin syncing up with the adult world of time. Some might say, half jokingly, half sadly, that this is the true loss of innocence. Then there's anticipation, our brain's built-in time machine. Waiting for something exciting can make time feel like it's dragging through molasses. Is it Friday yet? Becomes a chant in the corridors of hope. Strangely, dreading something can have the same effect. Our minds project into the future, rehearsing conversations, predicting outcomes, spinning endless scenarios. It's the same neural machinery we use to recall the past, now running in reverse. In this way, time becomes elastic, stretched out by both excitement and anxiety. So, is psychological time reliable? Not really. Is it logical? Often, no. But is it deeply human? Absolutely. We may live in a universe governed by ticking atoms and orbiting planets, but the time we actually live in, the time that shapes our days, our dreams, and our decisions, is woven from attention, emotion, imagination, and memory. It's not time measured, it's time felt. And that may be why it feels so strange, so inconsistent, and yet so profoundly personal. But let's be honest, no conversation about time is truly complete until we ask a big, wild, reality-bending question. The one that's launched 1,000 science fiction novels and fueled countless late-night debates. Can we travel through time? Well, maybe, but it's complicated. Time travel, at least in theory, isn't entirely forbidden by physics. According to Einstein's general relativity, the fabric of space-time isn't rigid. It can bend, stretch, and under extremely rare and currently unworkable conditions, even fold back on itself. If that's true, the possibility of leaping into the past or future isn't totally off the table. Let's begin with the easy kind. Traveling into the future. This one's not only possible, it's already happened. Thanks to the effects of time dilation from Einstein's special relativity. If you move very, very fast, close to the speed of light, time slows down for you relative to someone standing still. So, if you hop aboard a spaceship, zip around the galaxy at near light speed, then return, Earth might have aged decades while you've only aged a few years. Congratulations, you've time traveled to the future. No flux capacitor required. This isn't just theory. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station experience a tiny bit of this time dilation. They orbit Earth at high speed and age just microseconds, less than those of us on the ground. Not enough to notice, but enough for atomic clocks to measure. Technically, they return to Earth ever so slightly in the future, and still make it back in time for lunch. So, future time travel? Heavy checkmark checked. But what about the real mind bender, traveling into the past? Now things get trickier. General relativity does allow certain mathematical solutions, like closed time-like curves, that could, in theory, permit backward time travel. Think of it like walking a lap around space-time and ending up back at yesterday. One idea involves wormholes, hypothetical tunnels connecting two distant points in the fabric of space-time. If you could somehow take one end of a wormhole, accelerate it to near light speed, then bring it back to its starting point, time on that end would lag behind. Step through it, and boom, you'd emerge in the past. In theory, at least. In practice, there are some slight issues. We don't even know if wormholes exist. If they do, they may collapse instantly. Keeping one open will require something called negative energy, which is as exotic and unavailable as it sounds. So building a wormhole time machine is, let's say, slightly outside our current engineering capabilities. Maybe check back in a few centuries. But even if we could travel to the past, we'd instantly run into a universe-sized headache. Paradoxes. The most famous is a grandfather paradox. You travel back in time, prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, and inadvertently erase your own birth. But if you were never born, how did you go back in time in the first place? It's a logic loop that seems to collapse on itself. To untangle this, physicists and philosophers have proposed a few clever solutions. One is the block universe model. In this view, time is like a film reel. Past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. If you travel to the past, you can't change it because everything you do was always a part of it. You're just playing your pre-written role in a cosmic screenplay. Another is the many worlds interpretation from quantum mechanics. Here, every time you make a change in the past, a new universe branches off. You didn't change your past. You created a new timeline. So you could prevent your grandparents from meeting, but only in that alternate universe. Your original timeline remains unchanged. Then there's the Novikov self-consistency principle, a fancy name for a stubborn idea. You can't create a paradox, no matter how hard you try. The universe won't let you. Try to assassinate your grandfather? De Gunjas. You trip, he joins a monastery. Somehow, events conspire to keep the timeline intact. It's like the universe has built-in rules to prevent chaos. A cosmic insurance policy against reality imploding. Still, all of this remains highly theoretical. No one's built a time machine. No one's met a confirmed time traveler. And despite the internet's fondness for mysterious figures in old photos, we have no evidence of visitors from the future. And that raises a curious point. If time travel is possible in the future, where are all the tourists? Shouldn't we be surrounded by selfie-snapping visitors from the year 4000, crowding museums, crashing medieval banquets, or live-streaming the Big Bang? Some scientists speculate that time travel, if possible at all, may only work from the moment it's invented onward. Meaning, until someone builds a working machine, there's no past to return to. The timeline is closed until it isn't. Or maybe the visitors are here and they're just very, very good at blending in. And so, after drifting through waves of time, through the vast skies and tangled theories, we come to what seems like the end. Or perhaps, just another moment in the endless sea of moments. We've seen ancient sundials flicker under the sun's shadow. We've heard the quiet pulse of atomic clocks orbiting above the Earth. We've ridden Einstein's waves of space and time. And finally, we've stood still in front of one haunting question. Does time really exist? Or is it simply something we feel? We've learned that time isn't just the ticking hands of a clock. It's something deeper, humming quietly within us. A rhythm that guides our sleep, hunger, emotions, and breath. Time lives in our blood, in light and darkness, in the warmth of afternoon sun, and the cool hush of early morning. It's shaped by memory and emotion. Time flies when we're laughing. It stretches when we're waiting. It freezes in fear and flows in joy. Sometimes we wish we could pause it. Sometimes we wish we could go back and rewrite the pages. But time, like a river, moves only forward, unfolding life with all its beauty, chaos, and surprises. We dream of time travel, don't we? Of fixing our mistakes, revisiting lost moments, or buy an absurd amount of Bitcoin. But maybe time's one-way nature is exactly what gives life its meaning. We can't edit our past like a video. We live moment to moment, fully, imperfectly, beautifully. And now, Yanni, as words begin to slow, and sleep wraps its arms gently around your shoulders. Let me ask you softly, once again, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it in your little corner of the world? Strange, isn't it? After all we've said about time being relative, flexible, maybe even imaginary, we still reach for it. A glowing number on a screen, the hush of night settling in, the soft rhythm of breath winding down. If this journey brought you calm, if the wonders of the universe offered you a little peace, if the questions helped you drift closer to sleep, then I'm grateful. Maybe time is an illusion. But right here, in this stillness, in this voice, in this very breath, you are real, and you are exactly where you're meant to be. Sleep well, fellow traveler. Wherever and whenever you are,